Hello everybody, welcome to another Top 10 edition of Magic Mics, proudly sponsored by our Patreon supporters and CoolStuffInc.com, where you can find cool stuff in stock every day, and our co-sponsor CardHoarder.com, offering the best inventory prices and delivery of cards for Magic Online. I am Evan Irwin. We get started each Top 10 by saying hello to my two co-hosts, Aaron Campbell.
Hello.
Ruben Bressler.
Hi, how is everyone today?
Well, you and me get to hang out this week.
Yeah,
we get to chill.
Sometimes happens.
Now, last week was somewhat, I think, was the first time ever we've had 30 unique cards on all three lists. Maybe one other time, but it's been very, very rare.
Not this week.
No, we have some catching up to do with our sharing of the top tens. And
I mean, I'm wearing green. I came prepared. I don't
That's
know
fair.
about you guys. And I'm sick. Like, I'm supposed to be the one who's not talking very much tonight, and I guess I'm gonna have to do a lot.
Yeah, when you pull the rubber band and that thing snaps back, I've got 3 hires and 2 sames.
Ruben has 5 hires and 2 sames, and I guess our 2 sames are the same sames.
They might be the same sames.
I wish I could relate. I don't have any hires or sames.
Wow.
Actual.
You have a pristine list? You have no hires?
No.
Jeez.
Must be.
They don't call me original Estrus for nothing.
Hey.
I am unoriginal Ruby.
Well,
derivative Ruby.
Yes. The River Ruby.
Same old... whatever, okay.
Okay. We also begin with our choice of the top comment from last week in a segment we call Honorable Mention, where Ruben will tell us who was the most luxuriant and letting us know what card we did not choose as one of our top 10 banned and restricted cards. Ruben?
Well, I'm sure that Evan will agree with me because we are the same. Aaron might disagree because she's original. But this week's winner is Negative Gamerscore, who writes this sort of love letter to Aaron. I'm a little surprised by the lack of Golgari Grave Troll, particularly on Aaron's list. If you want to talk about banned cards with interesting stories, I can't think of a card put on the same format's ban list more than once. It and other cards with Dredge enables a type of gameplay I hesitate to call magic, certainly true the first time you see it. It's the poster child for a mechanic that shares a home with the titular mechanic on the Storm scale. It was even featured in a dual deck along with Life from the Loam, so hashtag Dredge in Walmart. In all, this card is certainly deserving of a mention. I couldn't agree more. Well done. Hashtag Dredge in Walmart I don't think is as catchy as of a hashtag, but yeah, I mean, it's one of the rare return to the ban list cards, along with I think Gush had it in Dredge, like had some time on and then off and then on again and then off again. There's been some stuff like it, but it's certainly got an interesting story to tell.
Yeah, there were a number of commenters who expressed surprise at that, and the truth is I'm still in mourning. I still can't believe it happened. I'm still convinced it's just a dream. Yep. If I just pinch myself hard enough, it's going to come back, and so I'm just not ready to accept it. If I put it on my list, that means it's happening, and I'm not ready to confront that yet.
You know,
and you certainly had Dread Return, and like you've had some representatives of the the underground, underhanded Dredge clan swarm, if you will.
I kind of think of the ban list as like the Arkham Asylum, and inside of it you have all these dastardly characters who very well may be insane and wreak havoc. And then so like the Joker broke out and then like wreaked the havoc, and then the Batman, the DCI caught him and threw him back in there. And sometimes they get out and they're totally fine. Who cares? Sandman's
they at least blend in with society. Yeah.
There you go. Not any crazier than the rest of us.
Yeah.
But there you are. All right. So Negative Gamerscore, please contact us on one of our social channels.
I love that metaphor, man.
That's pretty good.
I love it.
That's good. Also, hashtag Dredge in Walmart. I mean, it's still good. Still positive.
Not bad.
Don't put that thing. Well, they're about to put Commander Storm in Walmart, but we'll get to that on Wednesday.
Yeah.
Whew, all right. So that said, get in contact with us. Get a $50 gift certificate to CoolStuffInc.com. Thank you very much, Cool Stuff, for providing that to us. Mm-hmm. But we got to talk about some elves, some mostly green dudes. There's a mono white elf
and ladies,
and ladies, of course, absolutely. Moving here to number 10, Aaron. I know you got one.
I do.
What is it?
My number 10 is the the future or the aged version of a character we got to know previously as her younger self in an earlier set. She was a returning character in Dominaria, and she'd grown a little bit. She'd grown, she'd become a woman. On her card, it was really stressed that she was kind of acting as an individual with her ability and with her storyline. And when she came back in Dominaria, it was really stressed that she was thinking of her people, and she was in more of a leadership role in terms of her ability. And she really blossomed. She definitely grew a little bit. She got a little thicker. And I love me an elf who don't need no mans. My number 10 is Grand Warlord Radha. So Grand Warlord Radha is 2 a red and a green. She's a legendary creature elf warrior, 3/4. With haste, whenever one or more creatures you control attacks, add that much mana in any combination of red and or green. Until end of turn, you don't lose this mana as steps and phases end. So the original Radha was from Planar Chaos. And so you can tell from her ability, the original's ability was every time she attacks individually, you can add 2 red to your mana pool, or you can tap her to get 1 green. And so you really see kind of the collective effort. If you look really closely in the background of Grand Warlord Radha's art, you see her people. You see the people of Keld. Her flavor text says, "The future is my gift to Keld." You see her proudly standing over a dead body with a sword buried in him. And she's just so strong. She's so powerful. And this was a really nice evolution. This was a really nice return to a character that we'd met before. And I really think they did her justice.
I thought it was really cool seeing the differences, sort of how she grew up and how sort of things evolved, and now it's about everybody. And there's not a better way to say I don't want no man than to put a sword through him and say, paint me this way.
Look at the sword. It doesn't have any blood on it. Her fists have all the blood on it.
Yeah.
So I think she's just using the sword as a walking stick at this point.
She puts that down first.
Yeah, he's not wearing too much armor. I think that she just beat the crap out of this guy. Grand Warlord Radha showed up during the penultimate, or maybe it was the ultimate episode of the Dominaria storyline.
Yes.
During the pinnacle, the climax, the attack on the Cabal and the seizing of the Blackblade. Without Radha, Gideon doesn't get the Blackblade. She was there in the Cabal pits, and so they sort of joined forces there. With the big beefy arms.
She threw a knife in Whisper's eye. Like, how cool is that?
Wow.
Absolutely. Radha, of course, played a major part in my Board the Weatherlight story, the Dungeons and Dragons adventure that I wrote for Grand Prix Las Vegas, which you can find online. You can search Board the Weatherlight, shameless plug. Had a ton of fun playing that character and being this no-nonsense, like grown up, but also really independent, but also protective character that also had a bit of snark to her. And so just a really fun character and an excellent way of having the mechanics show the character's growth.
Absolutely. So look, we'll move on here to Ruben's number 10.
Nope, no, we're not. Because
you had a
50-50 shot, and turns out this one's higher on someone else's list.
You don't even get number 10? Oh, that's a whooping. That's a straight whooping. Well, look, I got one. What was it about the original Ravnica set? What was it that was just so freaking, magical, if you will? There was something special about Ravnica. It's like they essentially got it right in whatever form they needed to get it right for a multicolor set. And I'm trying, when I thought back, when I was looking through the list of elves, right, looking at all the elves ever made, and I came upon this one, I was like, man, this one actually made me love Ravnica in a way that I didn't really expect to. And they also didn't make a token card for this, and it made me really upset. But there is one on Magic Online. But Tolsimir Wolfblood is so cool. It's just so cool. It's a white, a green, 4 generic mana for a 3/4 rare legendary elf warrior. Other green creatures you control get +1/+1. Other white creatures you control get +1/+1. But the piece de resistance is the tap : put a legendary 2/2 green and white wolf creature token named Voja into play. Where's my Voja token? Where's my... They're all good boys. They're all good boys, wizards. And Tolsimir, there was just something so evocative. Like it was cool, it was powerful. I mean, at the time, back in the day, we didn't get much, but it was neat. It made like a 4/4, but not made a 4/4. The art was terrific, and it exuded this flavor, and there was just something really cool about Tolsimir Wolfblood. It was just kind of my jam.
Yeah, absolutely. The Voja token is second, I think, only to the Snake token of Forthos Mike's ire-driven, non-printed tokens thus far. Tolsimir Wolfblood, definitely one of the most iconic cards from the original set, being a Wolf Rider and a Celestia Evangel, I think is what the title of the job is.
I think so.
And like having a mount that's a puppy dog is like just a cool thing to have. And yeah, that's a great choice.
Yeah, I mean, Lockstone Hierarch is sort of like the power choice, but this one was just like that's the coolest card. It sort of started that love affair, like
real popular commander too, being a lord effect that can pump up all of your small green and white go wide style creatures.
Absolutely. So that's a fun one. Let's move on here to number 9. Ruben, do you have a number 9?
I actually have my own number 9, all to my own self.
Good.
So a lot of the cards that I put on my list are tournament pedigree cards. And I wanted to really highlight the Pauper Elves deck with at least one card on my list. And there are a couple of cards in Pauper Elves that I think really... Well, first of all, there's the Honorary Elf, Lead the Stampede. I think there was a lot of Honorary Elves, like Green Sun Zenith and like Glimpse of Nature. Distant Melody was in a lot of those old Pauper Elves lists. Natural Order, there's a bunch of cards like that that are they're not elves, but they're elves. You know what I mean? This is an elf. This is an elf that makes more elves when you play more elves. This is like the top end of the Pauper Elves deck. This is like what the elf deck wants to do. It got reprinted. So that there are more copies out there. It was a tough battle between this and Timberwatch Elf, which we may talk about later, and also Quirion Ranger, which we may talk about later. As which of these Pauper Elves cards do I really want to talk about? But really, to me, Alana Huntmaster is the Pauper Elves card that is Pauper Elves. You don't see it anywhere else, but it's a 4 of in every Pauper Elves deck.
Yeah.
Glistener Huntmaster is a 2 colorless and a green elf warrior, 3/3, originally from the Lorwyn expansion. Whenever you cast an elf spell, you may create a 1/1 green elf warrior creature token.
Yeah, this card's a house.
Just absolutely. Army in a can, perfect in the deck and the strategy.
Yeah, I mean, this is what you want on turn 4. You want to play another one on turn 5, and then you want to go nuts and lead the Stampede or whatever you got to do in order to get as many elves out as possible, because this leads to the overwhelming. Like, this got close to my list. This made my final sort of cut from list. This is a card you always want to see in your opening hand for elves, because you're like, okay, now I'm going to play this game entirely differently so I can get as much out of Alana Huntmaster as possible.
Right. And for me, the real break point was... Alana Huntmaster is in both of the dual decks, Elves versus Goblins, as well as I think that they're also in Elves versus Inventors. I think that was correct. Maybe I'm wrong on that one, but it also had a promo printing in like Commander, and it was in Eternal Masters. It was a Duels of the Planeswalkers promo, and so I just I really wanted to talk about it.
Yeah, it's really cool. Aaron, what's your number 9?
So I talked about my number 10 and the way that we revisit characters and how it feels really good when characters have an evolution that you can get behind, when they have an older version that you love and you love the newer version. And then there are the more tragic figures where we have our heroes from Magic lore that we come back to and we find they're in a worse place than when we left them. And there's that feeling of getting attached to a character and you're like, oh no, and kind of seeing the fate that has befallen them. And I can't think of any sadder case than my number 9, except maybe my number 8. We'll get there. This card is very scary, very broken in Commander, and just a nightmare when it comes to combat. My number 9 is Glissa the Traitor. So Glissa is a legendary creature zombie elf. She costs 1 black and 2 green. She's a 3/3 with First Strike and Death Touch. Think about that. Whenever a creature an opponent controls is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, you can return a target artifact card from your graveyard to your hand. First strike and death touch. So for those playing along at home, she's going to kill you. It doesn't matter how big you are. First strike means she hits first, and that hit has death touch. She's killing you if combat's involved. There's a lot of broken shenanigans with this involving ratchet bombs from back in Standard. Things are going to be dying if you're playing black and green, and certainly if you're playing her. The storyline of Glissa, she was one of the heroes of the Mirrodin storyline, who eventually succumbed to being near the Phyrexian oil, and became one of Vorinclix's kind of champions as Glissa the Traitor. And so when you look at the art, I spent years thinking that she had a snake's tail. But if you look really, really closely, she got legs, but the way that coil comes down, I thought that was all part of her. And so the art is fantastic. Shout out to Chris Ron. A very sad ending to a very beloved character. And, with all this talk of possibly going back to Phyrexia and doing the whole, I think it's the Silex thing, we very well could see Glissa again. So here's
wants to blow the place up with the Golgothian Silex.
It is hard to put into words how busted this thing is in Limited. It is an absolute freaking monster. How you either have the removal or you just die, because you have to put 3 creatures in front of it before you can actually deal any damage to it, and all of them have to have at least 3 power, because the one that lives is the one that's going to try to kill her. So yeah, Glissa the Traitor is just a monstrous house, and I can only imagine how, I don't know if annoying's right, but certainly powerful in Commander. Just getting back artifacts over and over again.
Sure, and really useful with artifacts that do the killing themselves. Things like Executioner's Capsule or Moonglove Extract are the real combos there. Not to mention other cards with sacrifice effects, and then if you just use a Terror to get back your, draw 3. What was that? The Dream Hedron 6-mana thing that draws 3 cards every time you sack it.
I know what you're talking about.
But yeah, I mean,
Dreamstone Hedron, I think.
Yeah, that's the one, Dreamstone Hedron. As you were mentioning, just a very sad story where she was sort of like the scapegoat of a lot of the problems. Like, it's not like Glissa could have done anything, even if she were on the surface, and she was not. She was off on a side quest with Slowbad for a while, and then returned to the surface, and basically everyone in her home blamed her for all of the woes that existed, and as a result lost a lot of her allies, and eventually got completed by Vorinclex, and just the opposite of a redemption arc. Really, really sad.
You gotta be hated pretty hard if they call you the Traitor. Like, that's your official
that was
title.
Her, that's what the people called her, was Glissa the Traitor, because she wasn't there.
Wow. All right. So my number 9 here is one of those things that Wizards likes to do, which is they take something old and busted and they put it on a creature. And
I'm a fan.
And that's cool, right? And when they did it for this card, it was one of the things that helped make M11 really exciting, because M10 had the Titans or whatever, and they should absolutely not have reprinted them, but they reprinted them, which was dumb. Yep. But this rare actually helped kind of make things really interesting for the time. And again, you just can't give them Survival of the Fittest, so you give them Fauna Shaman. Fauna Shaman is a green and generic mana for a 2/2 rare elf shaman from M11. You can pay green, tap, discard a creature card, search your library for a creature card, reveal it, and put it in your hand, and then shuffle your library. So this is the fixed version, and even the fixed version of Survival of the Fittest is a tournament-worthy card. This saw a ton of play. This is super popular. It's still a $12 card now. They need to reprint it at some point or other. I don't think Wizards want something this powerful back in Standard right now, because they just keep cranking the power level on the creatures. You don't want one that's going to go find all of them every single game. So that's a dangerous thing. But Fauna Shaman is a really super powerful elf, and again, just made M11 shine.
Absolutely. I think that it was a Magic Show segment where you were interviewing Patrick Chapin about his Survival of the Fittest deck at Grand Prix Columbus 2009, the Survival GP. The GP where everyone was playing Survival. It might not have been you, it might have been somebody else, but he was talking about how Survival is so good that he was also playing for Fauna Shaman in his Survival deck in Legacy, because he just needed those extra Survival triggers. It was crazy.
Wow.
It just speaks to the power level of the card. I love this card so much. I played a ton of it when it was in Standard. Even a bad Survival is a good card.
Yeah. Survival is survival, one way or another.
Yeah.
All right. So let's move on here to number 8. There are well over 300 elves printed in Magic. And yet, for the exact number 8, I share this choice with someone else.
Indeed.
Oh, I see. Well,
that's going to be me, friend.
It's going to be you, friend. Well, you know, this is one of those things I like to make those Twitter polls out of. So for those who aren't patrons, I can just be like, you know, again, out of the 360 whatever elves, we chose Oracle of Moldaya as number 8 because it's one of the coolest elves ever.
Sure did.
Oracle Moldaya is a green and 3 generic mana. It's a rare elf shaman, originally and still from only Zendikar. That's really shocking, by the way.
That is really shocking.
I was not expecting that. It is a rare 2/2 elf shaman. You may play an additional land on each of your turns. You play with the top card of your library revealed, and you may play the top card of your library if it's a land card. Those are just 3 awesome sentences that just go together. This card is like not busted, but it's just really, really, really good.
It's close to busted. I mean, it's on my list for a number of reasons. It obviously won a Pro Tour in the hands of Paulo Vitor, Dance Dance Revolution, Damo de Rosa, Pablo Doritos, as he's better known, in that awesome rug control deck.
Yeah.
In sort of a rug control mirror against Guillaume Montagnon in the finals of that Pro Tour. It's obviously in the cube. It's also in the top 128 cards ever of the MTG bracket. So in terms of overall clout, it's not just one of 300 elves. It's of one of over 16,000 Magic cards that have been whittled down to the final bracket. And it's up against Karn Liberated in the next round. So I don't know if it's going to win that round.
That's going to be a tough one.
That's going to be a tough one. Also, Aaron, you might be interested to know that Reed Duke won the Star City Games Standard Open in Washington, D.C. in 2013, maybe 12, with the Temporal Mastery rug, like weird ramp, the 2/4/6 deck that I like to refer to as 2/4/6, where on 2 you went Rampant Growth or like the Ramp Elf that was legal at the time, and then on 4 you either went Solemn or Oracle of Moldaya. And then turn 6, you played a Titan or some other ridiculous, like Bonfire or some other huge effect, and then took a bunch of extra turns as well. It's. I think it's well deserving of a slot. The fact that there's only one printing kind of blows my mind.
It's $38 right now.
Yeah, that seems like a shoe-in for a future printing of a promo of some kind. So
yeah,
I mean, it's reaching to the point where if they reprint it in a master set, they might make it mythic, just because it's worth like $40 or whatever. We'll call that
it's a casual all-star too. It's in a ton of commander decks and things like that.
Oh, there's a reason it's $30 something, $40.
We're recording this on Tuesday, July 24th, 2018. So if they happen to preview it for the Lands Matter deck sometime later today, and we just don't know about it, don't sue us. But yeah.
Wow, if they did, that would be quite the cash infusion into a commander product. So that's good to know, but that also means that Erin has her very own number 8, for she is the original mistress.
My number 8, another character that was seen as a hero, particularly among the elves and in the Mirrodin storyline. Another character we hadn't heard from for years until their fate was revealed in Commander 2015, when we saw that they were also taken and corrupted by the Phyrexians. Yes. My number 8 is Ezuri, Claw of Progress.
Yeah.
So Ezuri is 2 green and a blue. He's a legendary creature, elf warrior, 3/3. Whenever a creature with power 2 or less enters the battlefield under your control, you gain experience counter. This was the commander set that really relied on those. At the beginning of combat on your turn, put X +1/+1 counters on another target creature you control, where X is the number of experience counters you have. So Ezuri being the elf bandit who somehow turned into a hero during the Phyrexian invasion, was working with Glissa. And ironically enough, now that they are both completed, they're actually on opposite sides. Vorinclex practices the Phyrexian methodology in a very different way, believes more in sort of nature, making big, obnoxious beasts. Whereas Ezuri's more of the Jin-Gataxia sides of things, where they want more focused, sort of corruption. I think I might have flipped that, but the bottom line is they're on opposite sides of the conflict, and they both are competing for opposing sides of Phyrexia. It's just very ironic that 2 heroes that worked together are now warped and beyond repair, and are now fighting against each other. And this was just one of those moments where when that card and that image came out, there was that gasp of, no, not Ezuri.
Yeah.
Because Ezuri's gone and he's never coming back.
My boy, my baby boy.
Two great elves that get completed together, and this was who I originally thought you were talking about the last number for number 9. I was like, I literally typed in Ezuri. I was ready to copy, and like, that's not Ezuri, so that's cool. It's just, again, a card that was cool, not cool. Now it's just like this can get completely overpowered. This thing gets really ridiculous once you kind of get the engine going. I have seen an Ezuri Claw Progress deck just do silly, scary things. And
Simic, I believe, is the I remember reading somewhere that Simic was the most popular color combination in Commander, and when you pair it with things like,
I was going to add on to that thought that if it is the most popular, well, I have good news. Ezuri Claw of Progress is the most popular Simic commander.
Yeah. I mean, you pair it with like Invisible Stalkers, even just things like Glistener Elf or things like Blighted Agent, things that seem to be innocuous threats that suddenly get a lot bigger when these counters come into play. Pair it with things like Master Biomancer, and things really do get out of hand very quickly.
I mean, for this, I'm always thinking about Ezuri. Damn, that's a cold-eyed Selkie.
Yeah.
That Selkie's so cold-eyed. All right. Let's move on to number 7.
Shout out to McLemore and Ryan Lewis for that beat drop.
Wow. Moving here to number 7. I don't have one. It's higher on someone else's list. Ruben, do you have a number 7?
Obviously not.
Yeah.
Why would I ever have anything?
Ruben gets nothing. Nothing.
No thanks.
We're keeping it original. We're keeping it Estrus.
Oh God, I'm so sorry. Well, this is something,
You're
my
not
number
sorry.
7.
Don't lie to us.
I'm a little bit sorry. Well, my number 7 comes from a place that might mean a lot to Ruben. Ruben has been known to frequent an area called Trest as the voice of Leovold, emissary of Trest. And while my number,
Sorry, that was me channeling.
That's okay. While my number 7 is not Leovold, my number 7 is from the same area, is also a commander powerhouse. We talked about Simic being very strong in commander. This character is certainly one of the reasons why. This is one of those cards where I thought it knew what it did, and I didn't learn until like December that I'd been reading it wrong the whole time, and it's even better than I thought. My number 7 is Edric, Spymaster of Trest. So Edric is 1 colorless, a green and a blue. He's a legendary creature, elf rogue, 2/2. Whenever a creature deals combat damage to one of your opponents, its controller may draw a card. So for example, I was playing Kapatra. I had a boatload of snakes, as I'm wont to do, and I swung them in different directions, and they were like, yeah, so that's every snake and every opponent. That's you get a bunch of cards. And I was like, really? And I didn't know. And so I just marinated on all the cards. And this is another of those cards that gets very, very out of hand, especially if you're playing a commander with lots of creatures and a strategy that's meant to go wide. It's very easy for you to roll in cards. And this sort of really ties into sort of the politics of, I don't necessarily have to attack you, but I really want the card. And I really like what this card tries to do. And I like how it sort of embodies Trest. The thing that we see with Leovold and now Edric is sort of these politic type cards. And I really, really love that and hope we see more of them.
Yeah, there was the spoiler, again, this is being filmed on July 24th. And the spoiler today that came out for Commander 2018 was Xantcha, Sleeper Agent, which works super duper well with old Edric, because you give it to your opponent and they can't attack you. And that's sweet. And so Edric Spymaster Trest works perfectly with that. Like, here, you take it. You take the stuff. You deal the damage. Leave me alone. And there's a bunch of cards that they've made recently that also work really well with that mechanic. And,
also a card that had a promo printed of it when they launched Commander 2011. This was the launch party promo, and it's also banned in 1v1 Commander. And whenever you're banned in any format, like, very few cards get the amount of attention that is required to be banned in literally any format. And as we discussed last week, that list is not very long. And so if you get any attention, even if it's just in something like 1v1 Commander, you got to sit up and pay attention.
The Arkham Paddy Wagon showed up, and they were like, Edric, come on.
Yeah. We don't have many padded cells, but we got room for you.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on here to number 6. I was pretty certain that my number 6, for whatever reasons, was going to be alone. And maybe it's not. Maybe it's actually one of the hires of Ruben's 37. This card has seen a bunch of printings. Regardless, still maintains some value, as it should. And this is the card that, when you say Lore 1, and again, Lorwyn was a huge tribal set. Lorwyn, like, this is the card I think about when you're like, Lorwyn. You remember Lorwyn? And, like, I get this, and then I get, like, the Kitkin and stuff and the fairies or whatever, but I always get this because this card was so good, so powerful. And again, back in the day, we were thirsty. You know what I'm saying? We didn't get no creatures that were, like, sick and had like 37 abilities and the one-man planeswalker, whatever. No. When they gave us Imperious Perfect, it's so beautiful and it's so powerful, and you're just like, wow, it's gorgeous. And the artwork, Scott Fisher just absolutely killed it. I just think it's so gorgeous, and that it's so evocative of what they wanted the elves to be. You know, they were supposed to be perfect, literally calling this perfect. Imperious Perfect is a green and 2 generic mana 2/2. It is an uncommon elf warrior originally from Lorwyn. Other elf creatures you control get +1/+1. Green, tap, create a 1/1 green elf warrior creature token. So she a 2/2 that makes 2/2s. This card was a monster in limited, and was super awesome to play with her again when they let us do flashback drafts or whatever of Lorwyn, which was amazing. Has been super powerful, been printed like a whole bunch of times, but it doesn't matter. It's still worth some money because this is one of the cards that if you're playing the elf deck or you want an elf deck, this is one of the best lords they've ever made. It's gorgeous.
That's the key, is that it's a lord. Lords always maintain their value, especially for popular tribes like this. We recently saw that with the reprinted full art Death Baron promo. You know, zombies and skeletons, you want to have that lord. Well, there you go. Imperious Perfect exactly the same way. Obviously a major part of Charles Gindy's Pro Tour Hollywood win in a format that, you know, had those fairies and had those merfolk and had that Revelark craziness going on. And yet Imperious Perfect was the card that took Mr. Charles Gindy all the way to the title. Also had a beautiful full art States promo that I remember was like going for $1 billion back in the day. Just a really good choice. Glad it was on your list.
Yeah, and it seems to be it's not as expensive nowadays. I guess it kind of blew up and then it kind of stopped. You can get one for like $9 or $10, which is fine. But yeah, Imperious Perfect, just absolutely terrific. All right, over here to number 6. Ruben, do you have a
Come on, get out of here.
All right, that's terrific. Aaron, what's number 6?
Back to me at number 5.
Okay, buddy, we'll see you next round.
Yeah.
My number 6 gave elves another way to win the game. When you're playing Pauper Elves, Modern Elves, Legacy Elves, and dare I say maybe even Vintage Elves, you know, you're really known for doing one thing. You want to go wide, you want to make lots of elves, and then you want to pump them somehow, whether it be with Ezuri or whether it be with a Craterhoof Behemoth or something like that. And that's just kind of what elves does. But this gave elves another way to win the game. And this card even gave people some hope that maybe we might see elves in Standard again. Magic Origins gave us several elves, specifically the black version that dealt with like there were the versions, the Eye Blights, I think they were called, or things of that nature. But we got to see a different side of elves, and so this was one of the cards that made people think that maybe we'd have elves in Standard again. And this card even saw play in the sideboard of some elves decks and other formats, in case you happen to have a clogged board state, you need some way to punch through, or if they happen to deal with the way that you plan on pumping things. This is another way for you to win. I love this card. My number 6 is Shaman of the Pack. So Shaman of the Pack is 1, a black and a green. It's a creature type elf shaman, 3/2, in keeping with that weird Eye Blight. They have kind of the odd power and toughness. When Shaman of the Pack enters the battlefield, target opponent loses life equal to the number of elves you control. And so if you're playing an elves deck, odds are you got a lot of elves. And so this is a neat way that you can sort of just drain people. Wirewood Symbiote is a way to bounce creatures, I believe. It's the one that elves that does that. And so you can just whoop, whoop, and just get your opponent. And so I love that it gave elves another way to attack, and I love that it saw play in older formats. And I really wish it was enough to make it in Standard, but it just really wasn't the case.
I believe you were thinking of Wirewood Symbiote. Is that correct? Return.
Yeah, that's what I said, yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I thought I said something else. Shaman of the Pack, thank God it's not a common. It would just be the stupidest possible thing you could do in Pauper. Oh my God! Like this.
I might play it in Pauper then.
This card just no, you can't because it's not common.
We can have Gary. I mean, come on.
Well, yeah, Gary's also dumb, but the Shaman of the Pack by itself is just... This card read scary. When it showed up in Magic Origins, it read scary. It ended up being nothing, but like, they pump enough elves out. This thing kills people. This thing bounces. This thing gets blinked. I mean, it's not much for Shaman of the Pack to run away, but I think it's safely pinned in right now.
Yeah. I mean, people play Black Splash and Elves in Modern a little bit sometimes. Just for this card, and it is a beating when you collected company into 2 of these with 2 more on the board already, or something ridiculous like that. Yeah, it's a hell of a card.
Oh my God! All right, well, Shaman of the Pack is super sweet. I got it marked down, which means we get to move on here to number 5, which Ruben actually has. Oh my God.
All right, I finally get to talk about a card of mine. And somehow, I mean, I guess it makes sense for it to be. Hopefully, did anyone have any hires yet?
I've had one hire.
You had one hire. It's probably not this one. I don't know. Maybe I'm the only one who had Sylvan Advocate on their lists.
Oh.
That was all you, buddy.
Yeah, that's a weird one to be alone on, I think. I mean, you look at the card, it's Sylvan Advocate. It's a one colorless, 1 green mana, 2/3 Druid Elf ally with Vigilance. As long as you control 6 or more lands, Sylvan Advocate and land creatures you control get +2/+2, originally from Oath of the Gatewatch. Yeah, what a standard powerhouse Sylvan Advocate was for such a long time in Collected Company, in Abzan, in that weird Gruul ramp deck, in random.
Wasn't this our preview? Wasn't this our preview?
Sylvan Advocate? Was it?
I don't remember. I'll have to go back and look.
May have been.
I could have sworn it was our preview for Oath of the Gatewatch.
Well, it also won a Pro Tour in the hands of Steve Rubin. He won at Pro Tour Shadows over Innistrad. With 4 copies of this in his deck. I mean, boy, this is a heck of a card. It was just a staple part of Standard right up until it rotated, I think. I mean, maybe the power level of Kaladesh sort of pushed it out. But yeah, I remember Sylvan Advocate just running over everybody in the green-white tokens deck. As I mentioned, in Collected Company, it was the go-to 2-drop. Yeah. It was good on turn 2. It was good late. It's just and it's in the Legacy Cube as well. Not in the Vintage Cube. I think you need to fit some more stuff in, and so you need to cut a little bit. And Sylvan Advocate hit the cutting room floor to make room for things like, I don't know, Hermit Druid or whatever. But yeah, Sylvan Advocate, boy, it's a hell of a card.
It turns out, at least based on what I see here, that this was sort of during the transitionary period, and I believe I made a separate video just for Sylvan Advocate. This was my preview for Oath of the Gatewatch, and I think we eventually kind of formed over into our previews. But yeah, this is amazing. This is one of those, you get it, and I was like, oh my God, they gave me one of the best cards in the set because this card is ridiculous.
And it absolutely was.
Yeah, on its own, it's just a 2-mana 2/3 Vigilance. Those are stats we these days we're getting used to. But then
we have the Thorn Elf now in the most recent set, but it doesn't have Vigilance.
No. Thorn Lieutenant or whatever.
Thorn Lieutenant, yeah.
Yeah, and it's amazing, by the way. And yeah, this card is sweet. As a 2-mana 4/5, it always just kind of felt unfair. You're like, man, nice Tarmogoyf-esque card you got there.
Absolutely.
For doing nothing but playing lands, which is what you want to be doing. All right. So, Sylvan Advocate is sweet. Was not my hire yet. I can imagine my hire might actually be higher on your list, Ruben, but we'll see. Aaron, what's your number 5?
My number 5 is a card that, to my knowledge, didn't really see any real play until Amonkhet came out. Feel free to correct me. I wasn't around for Shadowmoor. I wasn't around when this set was during its heyday, so I might have missed something. But I certainly didn't hear about this card until Amonkhet came out, when a little card called Vizier of Remedies was released. And some enterprising brewers went to work and were like, oh, hey, y'all. This is a card that makes it so you can't put -1/-1 counters on something. And so if something needs counters, you don't have to do that, and you can form a loop. And that's a really dangerous thing. And before you know it, a new combo deck in Modern was born. My number 5 is Devoted Druid. So Devoted Druid is a colorless and a green. It's a creature type elf druid 0/2. You can tap it to add one green in your mana pool. You can put a -1/-1 counter on Devoted Druid to untap it. And so when you pair that with Vizier of Remedies says that if one or more -1/-1 counters will be put on a creature you control, that many -1/-1 counters -1 is put on it instead. So that means that this elf is never going to have a counter on it, which means you can just whoop, 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 and make infinite mana. And so you can eventually cast your whole hand. You can cast your Collected Companies. If you have an Ezuri, you can pump it to oblivion and overrun your opponent. And so this combo, sometimes sees play in Modern, but I'd never heard of this card until Amonkhet came out, until I started going on Magic Online, and I was like, what kind of nonsense am I facing? And you mentioned, Ruben, elves kind of having a black splash there for a while. Vizier of Remedies actually pushed modern elves in more of a green-white direction with the Vizier and with Settle the Wreckage and things of that nature. And so, yeah, it just goes to show you that sometimes all it takes is one other card to really make a card good, and that's what happened with Vizier of Remedies and Devoted Druid.
Yeah, this card was really good back in the day.
Was it? Okay.
Oh, it was. It won all sorts of stuff in 2008,
Absolutely.
2009, Pro Tour qualifiers, after regionals, after nationals.
All right.
It was one of the very few cards that could jump you from 2 to 5. The other one being the Soul Ring Elf, which is the
Jaraga Tree Speaker?
Jaraga Tree Speaker, yeah, the level up Soul Ring Elf. I played this at States while it was in Standard, where I would go this or some other elves into hopefully turn 3 dramatic entrance and drop a Progenitus or something like that. This was in that impromptu raid, Doomgape deck that was like sort of a joke for a while.
Doomgape, wow.
But yeah, I mean, initially, do think about that. That's my drag name. But the real thing about Devoted Druid is that, initially people were like, oh, does it work with Malira? Can we go infinite with Malira? And no, it doesn't work that way, but does go infinite with Vizier, as you mentioned. Incredibly potent. And also there was the Quill Spike combo deck.
Yeah.
Lest us forget that you could go infinite and make an infinite-sized Quill Spike, which was a 2 colorless and a Golgari mana for a 1/1 that had an activated ability of pay a Golgari and remove a -1/-1 counter from a creature you control to give a +3/+3. So you could just sort of twiddle those two back and forth, like your chocolate and your peanut butter, etc. Devoted Druid, hell of a card, big fan. That's a great choice.
And to be clear, they gave you Devoted Druid and Shadowmoor, and then the next set they gave you Quill Spike.
Yeah.
Like, literally, we're like, hey guys, it's right here. Like, it's obvious much. Jeez.
Quill Spike was my Pauper EDH General, or my Peasant EDH General, where you could pick any uncommon creature from Magic as your general, and then fill your deck out with commons. And so that was my deck. I just had a bunch of things like Grim Harvest and the generic black-green Tortured Existence style Pauper deck to be able to go infinite with the Devoted Druid as well.
Well, Quill Spike is my drag name, so
there you go.
All right. Whatever that's supposed to mean. All right. So, number 5 for me is probably on Ruben's list. I'm kind of expecting this to be on Ruben's list. I would actually expect to see it at least the same number or higher. Therefore, I can shame Ruben. That's the fun part, is the shaming. This card is banned in 1v1 Commander. This card is banned in Commander. This card has been, I believe, on ban list at some point in time. This card is one of the most powerful and evocative and just sort of just raw energy elf cards where you're like, what? The card does what? Because Raphelos, Llanowar Emissary from Urza's Destiny, which again is on the reserve list, yay. That is a 2-green 2/1 rare legendary elf druid, and it just has one really nice ability. Tap : add green to your mana pool for each forest you control. So this one jumps you from 2 to 5, and then to 6, and then to 7, and then on and on.
This jumps you from 2 to 6. Yeah.
Yeah, it's filthy.
Kind of stupid.
Yeah, it's 2 to 6. I mean, come on, seriously. Back in the day, whatever, man. Everybody's got mana. Everybody's got mana for days. You have you a Grim Monolith, and you a Grim Monolith, and there's a Raphelos. Who cares? So, it wasn't quite a Tolarian Academy per se, but this card is always bananas.
Damn close.
Always
in
in every
2018,
cue.
where we're excited we get Llanowar Elf.
I know, right? It makes 1 mana next turn. It's like Raphelos in the Wormcoil engine. Go, that's your life now.
Yeah, Raphelos into primetime, get 2 more forests next turn, and twine a tooth and nail. I mean, that's the life we lived in before this card was banned as a commander. I absolutely had one that was altered by my good friend Zane Reichert, who I believe still does magic arts, but he's also a comic book artist these days. He was Llanowar's. He was Yavimaya's emissary to Llanowar to help them combat the impending Phyrexian invasion, and was like part of the Weatherlight crew.
was his daughter, yeah.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I didn't know that.
Eladamri, right? Yeah.
I mean, Multani was his mentor. I knew that. So he was one of the few non-spirit people that knew Morrow sorcery. And so he could like shape and change, and that's why he appears different in lots of different arts, is because he himself knew the different types of the Morrow sorcery. And yeah, he was part of the Weatherlight crew, helping them look for the artifacts and stuff. Became good friends with Miri for all of that. Yeah, I love this card so much. Was my general for a long time. When it got banned as a general, put it back in my deck. Not on my list.
And yet, 3 hires.
Not on my list.
Not one Raphaelos, I swear. Well,
sorry, I took that back. Belby was Eladamri's daughter, not Raphaelos.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and Belby, he killed
Belby.
Belby.
Have my hide.
Oh my god. My favorite is that he's just like, you what? And he kills Belby, and that's like a story point.
Yep.
All right. So moving here to number 4. Ruben, do you have a number?
I do. I do have a number 4.
Great. Let's hear it.
And it's a card that, boy, let me count how many times this card's been printed. Let's see here. 4, 8, 12, 13 times.
Ooh.
Originally from Shards of Alara. Which is kind of surprising that this is the first time that it was printed. It was so late. I mean, it's been a big part of tons and tons of decks, not just Elves in Modern and Standard and Legacy, but also Pauper, also Extended. There was also Rally the Ancestors dominated Standard for a little bit there. Cryptolith Rites decks were real popular for a little bit there. So it's been a member of the dominant in Standard and other formats group for a while. It's just a really good value creature. Who doesn't love an Elvish Visionary, right? I mean,
this was my number 7.
There you go, perfect.
Yeah.
Colorless and a green gets you a 1/1 Elf Shaman. When Elvish Visionary enters the battlefield, draw a card. That's it.
This
Simple,
is
clean, to the point.
This is my poster child for, like, if someone's like, what's Magic the Gathering? And you like kind of explain it to them, sort of how it works. And then you go, this is one of the best tournament worthy cards they've ever made. This saw play continuously every moment it was available into Standard. This card is amazing. And you're like, it's a 1/1. And all it does is draw a card. That's all it does.
There are a couple of cards in the history of Magic where it's just like, how is this the best possible thing you can be doing? Right? There's a couple of them that are like, whenever there's a really clean creature. Another good one for me on this one is Taro's Faithful, which is 3 colorless and a white, 1/4. When it enters the battlefield, gain 4 life. It's like, how is that the best thing you can be doing in Standard while that thing's around? Right? Elvish Visionary is the same way. It's just like, how is this anything? And yet, it's consistently a 2 of in Legacy, and I think in Pauper, I think they only play about 2 or 3 of these.
2 of them.
It's been a 4 of in its life cycle to be able to, especially for the more combo-oriented things when you need to dig into your collected companies or dig into your Rally of the Ancestors. Obviously, you get its value on the way in. So leaving play, it's great. Has the keyword jump blocker. Just perfect all the way through. I love me an Elvish Visionary.
I mean, I'll turn one sideways. So don't bother me none.
Sure.
We've even seen them use this template for vampires. I believe it was Rivals of Ixalan. There's a 1 and a black vampire version. Yep. I think you lose a life when it happens.
You lose a life.
But still, it's something that is such a good design that they've started doing it on with other creature types, and that's cool.
Absolutely, yeah.
But only the elves get it for free.
Right.
All right. Well, we have now revealed my number 7. Yet we still have 3 cards that we don't know our own Ruben's list. Just pretty crazy. So that said, Aaron, what's number 4?
I've mentioned a couple times this episode how Elves is sort of known for going wide, and there's a lot going on. There's a lot of different elves hitting the board, and sometimes it can be very overwhelming, and you don't know which ones are really worth dealing with. Do you want to waste the counter spell on an Elvish Visionary? Do you want to waste the lightning bolt on a Quirion Ranger? The threat assessment is real, and you have to decide what's worth dealing with and what's worth ignoring. And so you see your Wirewood Symbiote, and you're like, I don't like it, but fine. And then they play a Birchlore Rangers, and you're like, sure. Then this card comes down, or it's about to come down. Nope. You got to counter it, Dark Blast it, Firestorm it. Don't let this hit the board, because if it does, you've effectively lost the game. My number 4 is Heritage Druid. So Heritage Druid is 1 green. It's a creature type elf druid. It's a 1/1, an uncommon, originally from Morningtide. Tap 3 untapped elves you control, add 3 green to your mana pool. If this thing resolves, like they say in Chicken Run, put your head between your legs and kiss your bum goodbye because the game is over. This card gets so out of control between the Nettle Sentinels because you tap them for a green, which you use to cast a creature, and then whoop, all the Nettle Sentinels untap. This, even if it has Summoning Sickness, you can still tap these elves to make green. This is the card that really gets that engine going and where things get out of control very quickly. This is a card that is now a $6, $7 card, $7 uncommon. Sees play in the modern list and the legacy list. But this is just one of those cards where it's like, you can let every other elf hit the board, but do not let this happen, because if it has, you've basically just lost.
Has done the very rare jump from uncommon to rare, as it was reprinted in Eternal Masters. There's a reason for that.
Along with Aether Vial and Sensei's Divining Top, not a common feat to pull off.
Yeah, it's
and
very rare.
Palaka Worm. There we go. There's another one on that list.
And that card is worth it, even if it was
that card's
uncommon.
worthy of rare. To be fair, so's Heritage Druid. This was my number 6.
Nice.
So we're finally filling in the blanks a little bit here. Obviously, a huge part of Pro Tour Berlin, the Elves Pro Tour, where there were double-digit copies in that top 8, and Elves took that tournament completely by surprise and by storm and dominated it in a way that rarely have we seen before or since. It's still a major part of the legacy elf deck and the modern elf deck. It's just an extremely powerful, potent 1/1 for 1.
Yeah, there's something about being able to use the creatures that you play with it to continue its ability that's dangerous. It's just dangerous.
The turn you play it, because it's not a tap ability. It doesn't have the tap symbol on the card. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Not only the turn you play it, but the turn you play anything else, it just gets out of control incredibly quick. Let's see here. My number 4. This is the last one I get to talk about because then I got higher, same. So
I also have higher, same at 3-2-1.
Oh my god, higher, same club. Not cool. Because this one's neat. This one very well could be one to fill in Ruben's list. This one checks all the boxes in terms of power level, in terms of tournament pedigree, in terms of being something that to this day remains a staple in its own archetype. And this is the card that when they made Infect, we were waiting for it. We were just like, are they really going to do it? Are they going to give us the 1-drop with Infect? Yeah. And by God, in New Phyrexia, they did it. Glistener Elf is from New Phyrexia. It is a 1 green 1/1 common elf warrior with Infect. This creature deals damage to to creatures in the form of -1/-1 counters and to players in the form of poison counters. So, this is the card that will kill you out of nowhere on turn 2 or 3 sometimes. At least the stupid deck lost Jataxian Probe or Gitaxian Probe or however you're supposed to say it. Because, it'd be like, oh, is the way clear? Are we good? Okay, -2 life and kill you with poison. That's how it would work.
This was my number 10.
Nice.
I love dark blasting these things.
What's up? Dark blasting?
I love dark blasting them.
It's nice. This card is part of the reason why Invigorate got banned in Pauper. There was a period there where Infect was the best deck in Modern. There was a period there where Infect was one of the best decks in Legacy, even if it was only in the hands. Yeah, even if it was only in the hands of Tom Ross. Who's the only one that could figure it out. What's up?
Aaron Barrich is the
Aaron Barrich, sure.
Very nice.
Glistener Elf is a unique elf on this list in that it does something very specific. It doesn't appear in those elf decks in decks with other elves like Heritage Druid does. It's more along the lines of Oracle of Moldaya in that it's so unique and so different that it is in a class all by itself.
Beg me for life, and I will fill you with the glory of Phyrexian perfection. That's some flavor.
Hell of a flavor text.
All right. 5 kids.
Wow. Fill you with the Phyrexian,
Perfection? All right. Quill Spike, drag name. All right. Well, as mentioned earlier, we both have hires and sames until the rest of the list. So, Aaron, what's your number 3?
I've got you, Ruben. My number 3 is something I'm sure you have some thoughts on. So this is a card that has some old school pedigree. One of the decks it originally saw play in was lovingly referred to as the Rock and his Millions.
Yep.
A young man named Sol Melka showed up with a Type 2 deck revolving around Birds of Paradise, Llanowar Elves, Phyrexian Plaguelord, and other just black-green goodies. If you ever see Sol playing in a tournament, he's probably playing black-green. Like, he is to the Rock like I am to Dredge. Like, that's just our archetype. We play it when it's good, we play it when it's bad, and that's what we do. But this was the first taste of this card. Ruben loves him a squirrel token. The art on this is just so hilarious, and it just has to have a place in anyone's heart. My number 3 is Deranged Hermit. So Deranged Hermit is 3 and 2 green. It says Summon Elf. It's so old. It says Summon Elf, creature type elf. 1/1 with Echo. During your next upkeep, after this permanent comes under your control, you can pay its casting cost or sacrifice it. When the Hermit comes into play, put 4 squirrel tokens into play. Treat these tokens as 1/1 green creatures, and then it's a squirrel lord. All of your squirrels get +1/+1. So you would play this with things like Diabolic Servitude, which means it comes back into play, and where the deck got its name of the Millions is the millions of squirrels that you make with this card, and sort of recursion effects. And so another unique elf that doesn't see play with the other elves. You know, you don't see this in an Infect deck, you don't see this in an elf deck, but you do see it in sort of a rock style deck, and this deck has a long history of tournament pedigree, and it's just an elf who makes squirrels, and you see sort of the art of just the squirrels hanging around this shrouded figure, and just what's not to love about this card.
I mean, they a Deranged Hermit in and of itself, and this is, I love it when they're so old that you're still treating things like things. It's like adorable, right? You go like, they're treating stuff. Silliness. Was a spiritual successor of Thelanite Hermit from Time Spiral, where it was instead of being
spiritual
just
predecessor, I think is what you mean.
Yes, it was the one that inspired. Yeah. This is the one that inspired Thelanite Hermit, which was a morph card, which when it unmorphed, it made 4 Saprolings, and Saprolings got +1/+1, because for whatever reason, it has to now be unsets that get squirrel tokens. We can't just get them in our regular Magic sets. That's not okay. That's not cool.
This was a Judge promo as well. Has some good tournament pedigree. It's in the cube. Another one that's in the bracket. This one was my number 7. I love me some squirrels.
Nice.
Justice for Earthcraft.
There you go, Justice for Earthcraft, perfect. The Rock, of course, of the Rock and his Millions, being the Phyrexian Plaguelord, with those bulging muscles. This was also a feature part of a deck called Elf Ball, so it was working alongside some elves at some point in its life, along with Skyshroud Poacher, to be able to go search this thing out. There was like a red-green aggro deck that this thing was a part of, because you could give all your squirrel tokens haste with things like Fires of Yavimaya. There were some very old-school, not necessarily the best deck in the format, especially when things like, Time Spiral and Yawgmoth's Bargain were around in Standard. But Trinity was a deck that was really popular. And Blue-Green Snap, which I played in Standard for a long time, which is a very old-school Patrick Chapin creation, which allowed you to go infinite with Deranged Hermit. All right, let me run you through this combo real quick. You need a Gaia's Cradle, and you need a blue producing land in play. And then you need the Hermit and your squirrels. Then you can tap your Gaia's Cradle for the requisite amount of mana and your island, play a Cloud of Fairies, untap those 2 lands, and with the 2 extra mana and your Baron Master Wizard that's in play,
Jesus,
you can sack a squirrel, return the Hermit, play it again, and make infinite squirrels.
Shut it down.
Wow.
So, there you go.
Grandpa, tell us how you made infinite stuff back in the day.
Green Snap. Yeah.
What's a snap? It's great. I love how you're like, we played back in Time Spiral. You could literally, people were like, the set, the block, the standard?
Right.
No.
The card
spell.
Time Spiral was legal. This card was legal alongside cards like Memory Jar and Pestilence and Sneak Attack.
Different time.
It was, there wasn't a great world out there for Deranged Hermit, but you know what? 5 mana, 9 power across 5 bodies. Like, what's not to love?
It's terrific. Well, move here to number 2. Aaron, what's your number 2?
My number 2 has a lot of questions surrounding it. Why does it have 2 toughness? Why does it cost a hybrid mana? Why does it have 3 abilities? Why is it an elf? I am not happy to put this card on my list, but a game acknowledges game. You can't deny the impact that this card has had on at least 2 formats. It was most recently banned in Legacy because of the effect that it was having on the format. And number 2 is Deathrite Shaman. So Deathrite Shaman costs a hybrid mana, either a black or a green, a Golgari mana, creature type Elf Shaman, 1 power and 2 toughness. Why? Why does it have 2 toughness? Don't understand. You can tap it to exile target land card from a graveyard, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. You can pay 1 black and tap it to exile target instant or sorcery card from a graveyard. Each opponent loses 2 life. Read, that's each opponent. So if you're playing Commander or Two-Headed Giant, everybody loses 2 life that you're facing. You can also pay a green and tap it.
Oh boy.
To exile target creature card from a graveyard, you gain 2 life, which I found to be the most problematic part. But yeah, this card is obnoxious, banned in Modern, now banned in Legacy because of the effect it was having on the format. We had the popularity of the check pile decks where you could run Golgon's Command and True Name Nemesis and Wasteland and Daze and Lightning Bolt. Why? Because of this card. Now it's sort of confined to Vintage, where all the really broken cards go, like the Retirement Home of Magic. And so, rightfully so, this card is powerful. A lot of people, don't even remember that it's an elf. Like, they're like, really? Yeah. But when you pair it with all the things that elves are capable of, with the bouncing, with the untapping, it's bad enough when Deathrite Shaman can do what it does only once per turn. But when you're playing with a fully powered elf deck, it's able to do all of that multiple times per turn. And so this is just a really obnoxious card, but you can't deny the impact that it had. And it was supposed to be a force for good and ended up doing the polar opposite. And so it's my number 2.
I mean, there's only so many cards that have bought me sandwiches before. This one did it. Mr. Gerald Thompson decided to put lunch on this card, and I was like, I think this card's insane. And he's like, I'll give you 8 weeks to see if it gets in the top 8. And it top 8's that weekend. It was glorious. This is our 1 mana Planeswalker. This is the stupidest thing that you could probably do at 1 mana, sort of pound for pound. Yes, you have your birds and whatever, but like, this card just kind of does everything, and it did everything so much they had to get rid of it in Legacy. It's ridiculous.
This was my number 3.
Nice.
So not too far off.
This is my number 3.
This was also your number 3?
So this was it's higher same.
We're right there. So we also had the same, even though it was both higher. Yeah. Anyway, this checks off almost all of my boxes. It's banned in at least 1 format. It's in the Magic Online Cube. It's been featured in many different decks across many different formats, including Jund and Bug and Checkpile. Birthing Pod used it. Shardless Bug used it. It's a hell of a card.
Wow. All right. So through the power of clues and deduction, I believe I have figured out what your number 1 is, Aaron, and what my and Ruben's number 1 is. Or they could be switched, I think, but I don't think so. Aaron, what's your number 1?
Wait, have we done our number 2?
She did her number 2.
Because we all had our number 1. Right.
We have 2 hires.
So much that I forgot where I was.
No, it's just the Aaron Campbell show this week. We're bit players.
Sleep out of my eyes.
We're pulling the curtains open. We're closing them for. It's fine. It's what we do here. Aaron, what's your number 1?
Speaking of, I mentioned Deathrite Shaman famously being created by Steve Argyle, very, very popular art. We're going to go with another card that Steve Argyle did a version of that was also quickly banned in the format. It was recently unbanned. It was seen as a pillar of Modern for years and years. This was one of those cards that people were speculating on every time the banned and restricted announcement would come around. Is it time? Is this the time that this card gets free? There would always be buyouts. People were really hoping. And eventually it did get unbanned, and there was, oh no, what does it mean for the format? And it did help Modern Jund a little bit. Players like JD and Clumparons were able to use this card to great effect, but it ended up kind of falling into the same rut as Jace the Mind Sculptor has, where Modern has evolved to such a point where if this is what you want to be doing on turn 4, that's cute, girl, but you got better options. And so it ended up being fine, but I think it's ultimately a good thing that this card is back. And this card was the OG, there was Deathrite Shaman, but this card was the one that, really wrecked a format back before that one. My number 1 is Bloodbraid Elf. So Bloodbraid Elf is 2 a red and a green. She's a creature type elf berserker, 3 power, 2 toughness, haste, and Cascade. When you cast a spell, exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a non-land card that costs less. You may cast it without paying its mana cost. Put the exiled cards on the bottom in a random order. Between this and Jace the Mind Sculptor, these were sort of the iconic cards of Modern that you thought of. I remember when Card Kingdom used to do these no Modern ban list tournaments, and they used to do these sort of boxing, kind of Fight Club style posters, and they would always do like Bloodbraid on one side, Jace on the other side. Like these are the powerhouses of Modern. Banned for years and years. There were a lot of theories as to Bloodbraid being banned, for someone else's crimes or for another card's crimes. But this card is ridiculously powerful. Ashlyn Rose famously just did this cosplay. I think Steve Argyle even painted her in it. And this card is just iconic. This card is powerful. It changes the way that Jund builds itself because you don't want to cascade into like a Thoughtseize. It feels terrible. But when you cascade into a Kolaghan's Command, that feels amazing. And the card just feels really, really good. And I'm glad that it's unbanned again.
Ashlyn Rose's game so strong that not only was Steve Argyle painting her, but Howard Lyon was also painting her at the same time in her Bloodbraid Elf outfit. It was absolutely amazing. This was my number 2, which means it was also 2. Ruben's number 2, because, again, deductions. However, that does mean that we all clearly value the power. Let me just
say real quick that as we segue, I have a few things that I check off my list, and Bloodbraid Elf checked them all. Is it banned and restricted, or was it banned and restricted? Sure was. Did it win a Pro Tour? It won 2. Naya Lightsaber in the hands of Andre Quambra at Worlds in 2009. And more seriously, obviously, Simon Gartson's Jund at Pro Tour Amsterdam.
It defined Jund, yeah.
Right, that is the card that was in Jund. Obviously, it's in the cube. It's another one on the MTG bracket. This was number 4 on the Aether Hub all-time top 10 elves. They have a much more scientific list where they put stuff together. And it had a promo. It had a beautiful F&M promo with different art as well. Just a huge part of all of those formats. It was also a deck that almost won a Legacy Open when Bloodbraid Elf and Jace were fighting alongside each other in the hands of Caleb Durward. At a tournament that I also top-aided, an SCG in Cincinnati in like 2008 or something. That was a weird tournament. Manaless Dredge won that tournament, Aaron.
God.
So you're welcome for that.
Well, it's nice to, you go back and you look at the Alara, Dominic Domingo, not like he did a bad job or anything, but then you go see Steve Argyle and he's like, oh, hi.
Yeah, I mean,
it's what Steve do. He's, he can do that. But Bloodbraid Elf by itself, again, this was one of those cards that you're like, it's going to break everything. We're going to die, and Bloodbraid Elf is going to be the one with the gun smoking. and no, I mean, it's good, it's playable, right? But it's not busted.
But I have to say, I was a little offended. When people started putting it in Panza. Don't do that. That's like putting ketchup on steak. Don't do that. Like that's disrespect.
I don't really want to cascade into a Utopia sprawl.
Or cascading. Cascading into Stone Rain. Like, come on. Like, aim higher.
That kind of feels very, Huggy plus Jesus action, personally.
No.
Well, I mean, if you're that deck, right? That's what you want to do.
Okay. If you're gonna do that, though, at least make sure the Stone Rain is Blackwater. Don't be
sullying up in here. Well, look. For our number 1, for Ruben and I's number 1, this is how this one went. Okay, I wrote down my number 1, and then I figured out what number 2 through 10 was. That was my personal process. It's a card that is ubiquitous. It is a card that defines Magic.
Yeah,
it's a card that's been in Magic since day 1. The first card set ever made included Llanowar Elves in it.
Oh.
Llanowar Elves is a green for a 1/1 common elf druid that has tap, add, green. It's been in a million sets. I don't even know how many times it's been printed. I'm going to go count here a little bit while Ruben's telling us about it. But,
sure.
But
it's the only one I have on my desk.
It's the
only of our top 10s that I've had sitting on my desk right there.
Wow.
Llanowar Elves still has some time to add some more top 8s and wins under its belt. This card has never been banned. However, it was deemed too powerful in Standard by R&D. So I'm going to say that counts, right? There was just a moratorium on this card for a while. It's so powerful that Llanowar Elves is number 1 by itself, And that's not even counting Findhorn Elves and Elvish Mystic and even Arbor Elf, which,
hey now,
to be honest,
Boreal Druid.
Sure, Boreal Druid has a Pro Tour win under its belt too with Charles Gindy. So, I think that Findhorn Elves probably could just be on this list under its own auspices. I think Elvish Mystic could probably be on this list, probably down at like 9. You could probably sneak it in there. If Llanowar Elves wasn't so very clearly number 1, I would have had all of those cards on my list as well.
It's one of those things that, like, Elvish Mystic just felt like such a weird, like, slap, because they were like, we can't have a single creature that has a plural name, and I'm like, Jesus. Really? You want to give that up because of the pluralization? Because when they brought it back, it was important that it was not Elvish Mystic. It was Llanowar Elves. That is awesome. And, yeah, it has 39 separate printings. 39. It's been in Magic forever. I hope it continues. I hope they find reasons to put it in the core set. I don't care. It's a design constraint for R&D. They can only make so many things good at 3 mana because of Llanowar Elves. But there's chain whirlers in the world that kill creatures like this.
Sure.
But yeah, there was one of the things that, again, Dominaria was just like this incredibly special magical set that's unbelievable. And one of the things was just like, and check out Llanowar Elves. Everyone just like, oh my god! Yeah. It was just as good as like revealing a mythic. You know what I mean?
It was.
That's how important Llanowar Elves is.
It was enough for even Kibler to be like, I might have to come play in this Pro Tour.
The list of decks that Llanowar Elves, the list of top tier, all like Pro Tour winning or almost Pro Tour winning decks that Llanowar Elves has appeared in over the years. Things like Frights, the French Rights deck, the Dragon Elves deck that took over Berlin, Green-Black Elves, obviously in the hand of Charles Gindy, the Doran decks, the Rock, going all the way back to the Naya Armageddon deck that Brian Kibler played at the Chicago Pro Tour, where he became the Dragon Master. Obviously, Fires had Llanowar Elves as a big piece of the puzzle. And let's not forget that the very first Pro Tour, which was won by Blue-White Control, was very close to being won by Bertrand Lestray's Green-White Aggro deck, which featured both Findhorn Elves and Llanowar Elves fighting alongside Sarah Angel and Urnam Jin. Wow. And isn't that the world we would much rather be living in than... I think that sounds great.
That's so. Yeah, again, for me, and this is just, it's one of those things that when I learn Magic, someone shows this to me and they're like, "This is what green does." That's how they explained it. They said they get the big monsters and they get to get them first, and you're like, "Awesome! This card is sweet."
As I've said, I think that the first Magic card I ever cast myself was a Llanowar Elves.
Man, card's so sweet. So that said, that is our top 10 elves. You'll see them on screen right now for your review. You can take a look at my list, Aaron's list, Ruben's top 10, and we want to hear from you about what card we did not talk about, and we'll select our favorite to win a $50 gift certificate to CoolStuffInc.com. But before we go, I want to thank my co-hosts. Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Ruben.
One bone broken for every twig snapped underfoot, Evan.
That's how we roll. It was number 1. I wasn't even a question. I wasn't even a debate. It was just number 1. All right. So I want to thank our sponsor, CoolStuffInc.com, our co-sponsor, CardHoarder.com, my co-host, Aaron Campbell, and Ruben Bressler, you guys for watching or listening, and I hope you support us at patreon.com/magicmics. Follow, like, tweet, favorite, share, subscribe, do everything social that tells people we exist. Catch us online at twitch.tv at magicmics, on Twitter at magicmicecast, our Magic Mics subreddit, and like the Magic Mics page on Facebook. Talk to us privately at magicmicspodcast@gmail.com. Follow the audio-only podcast at magicmicspodcast.libsyn.com, or find us on iTunes, or join us here next week, same time, same place, for another episode of Magic Mics. Good night, everybody.